Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today we have someone that became familiar with Maranatha not as a volunteer or a donor, but as a journalist. And that is Senior News Correspondent for Adventist Review, Marcos Paseggi. Marcos, welcome to Inside Missions.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Marcos, a lot of our listeners may think about missions from the perspective of a volunteer or a donor, but you're in the unique situation of writing about missions for your profession, among other things. So I'm curious, how you approach that and the impact that it's had on your life, but let's start by hearing just a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and what did you do early on in your career?
Well, I was born in Argentina. And I grew up most of my primary school and secondary school in northeast of Argentina between Brazil and Paraguay. So I grew up in it's a province of Misiones that is very, very international. There's a lot of descendants of immigrants from many countries, and the people are wonderful. So I was in touch from the very beginning with international people from the region and beyond. I became eventually what is called a sworn translator or a public translator with a license in the U.S. and in Argentina to sign documents, official documents, and also do translation, literary translation or translation of different kind of documents and articles. And when I was in college, it's a long story, but I began to work for projects for the General Conference and for the education department of the General Conference. And I kept working as a translator and writer for years on an on and off basis. So that's my background.
That's where you kind of got into journalism.
Yes.
Through that. Interesting. So now you work at Adventist Review. You do writing for all sorts of stories all around the world. What do you enjoy most about writing for the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Well, I think I always say is the best part of the church when you meet the people, especially at the local level. And local churches, sometimes you cannot really understand each other because they speak a different language, but you feel the love, the care of your brothers and sisters all around the world. And when you listen to them, when you share, when you spend time with them, you learn a lot. And many of them have wonderful stories that when we are able to share those stories with the world church, it's encouraging. Or it's an experience and you say, oh, yeah, I could do the same. Oh, if he could do it, I can do it too. So the power of stories is something I see over and over again. And we get the feedback from the readers saying, thank you for sharing that story. And that's very rewarding for me.
It really is one of the most special parts, I think, about traveling around the world, meeting church members. You get to learn from them. You get to go into their homes. You get welcomed into their church communities. And for me personally, when I'm out there traveling for Maranatha, you just feel special to be a part of a worldwide church like that. So
yeah. And we have some preconceptions, some ideas about, I remember some time ago I was in a country and I had a wonderful, blessed Sabbath with the members. And after that, I decided to walk back to the hotel, and I was thinking, what a blessed day. It was wonderful. And then I said, well, that's normal. That's expected. Why am I so surprised? And I started thinking, and I realized that I had been told in the past, no, members in that country are not that committed, or they have this issue or that issue. It was just a story somebody have told me, and I believed it. But when you go and when you talk to them and when you eat with them and it changes your mindset and you find that God is present and working everywhere, in every country.
There's nothing like experiencing the world for yourself. And I think that's what draws people to Maranatha's work. And we'll get to that later. Let's how did you first hear about Maranatha? I mean, what did you know about Maranatha growing up, or?
I have a recollection of sometime in Argentina when they say, yeah, the president of Maranatha is here visiting or something like that many years ago. I never paid too much attention to it. But yeah, the story is a little out of the ordinary, because when I began to work specifically in news, that was at early 2017. And the very first trip that I ended up going to cover was a Maranatha event in Cuba. Now, Don was inviting the editor, but the editor said, that's impossible, I can't go. Let's talk to the assistant editor.
So our president, Don Noble, was asking the editor of Adventist Review? Okay,
yes,
okay.
So he was trying to have him on board, and he had another commitment. So they talked to an assistant editor, the news editor. Nobody could go. And then somebody remembered me. I live in Canada. I work from home part of the time in Canada. And I say, would you like, I'm sorry that we are calling you, but we need someone would you like to go? And I say, yeah, I'll go. If there's a story, let's do it. So that was the beginning, but I was not aware of the scope, what I was getting into, so to say. So the other part of the story that I have to be very open about it is that in the past, I had some experiences with some other ministries, and my perception, and perceptions can be wrong, sometimes are wrong, but my perception at the time was that this is a little, with those ministries, a little show off, they're, I don't know.
I'm just here to prop up these ministries and do a PR piece for them. And
yes. So it was not the best experience. So I had my doubts. I said, well, what is the Maranatha? These old people with money, and they're trying to. But anyway, if there's a story, I'll go.
And you had told me previously that you didn't really travel before then.
No.
So this was kind of not normal.
I didn't have a budget. I was not in the plan, in the works. So I decided to go to Cuba, and I arrived there, and I began to look around, and I saw the people who were arriving for the event.
And this was a dedication. Was this the dedication of the Cardenas Church?
That was the dedication
of the
Cardenas
church that took. It was actually quite miraculous that it was even able to happen. So it was a big deal, very special for Maranatha, but also for the people of Cuba. Government was involved with, approving the project to happen. So it was important, and it was good. Probably, I'm sure they were happy to have somebody there covering it.
Well, that's why, yeah. I start seeing the people. Some of them old. I mean, it was difficult for them to get into the bus and off the bus. We were
some of these Maranatha volunteers and donors.
Some of them. So I don't know if you had ever connected to Maranatha donors and volunteers. They are not shy. So they saw me and say, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Yeah. So I would tell them, and they would tell me their stories. And some of them saying, "Well, this is my 20th, event or trip with Maranatha." Things like that. I've been everywhere, like in every continent almost. And so that changed my perspective when I saw the love, the connection they have with the ministry, with the work. And then when I began to hear the stories of the members, and something funny happened on the official inauguration, because inside there was, the official presentation of the leaders, and I went outside. I said, "There's no story here." I went outside to talk to the people, to talk to the deaconesses, to talk to young people, and suddenly I heard that they were calling my name. They were trying to introduce me, and I was far. So I said, "Well, I'm sorry," but talking to young people, they have been in a bus all night from the eastern part of the island to be there. Wow. And they were supposed to be all night again at the end of the Sabbath to go back. And they were so happy to be there. And then I said, well, I think I like telling these stories. I think this is, and from that event, well, the editor was really happy with the result, with the stories. Readers were really responded very well. And then, well, Maranatha was happy too. And so I said, well, I think there's something here.
It's a funny thing because it's all about a structure, a physical building, but the story really isn't about the physical building, is it?
No. When I talked to some of the pioneers, and they were telling me, saying, you have no idea. When we were young, nobody knew the church. They would laugh at us. They would mock. When we walked on Sabbath morning, it was not even a church. It was a small building, very, very simple. And they could see now the answer to years of prayer. And they were so happy.
For people that aren't familiar with this church, I'm gonna see if I can find your article if it's online somewhere, and I'll link to it in the show notes. You'll be able to see pictures of it's a really beautiful sanctuary, larger church probably than most churches in Cuba, and at least Adventist churches. And so it was an answer to prayer for so many people, and I know so gratifying for a lot of volunteers and donors, but like you're saying, also for the local church members there as well.
And it's a place of, even nowadays, the gathering for the church. Last year we were there again, and they were having a youth event, 300 young people.
Great.
In the church. Second story, they have a cafeteria or a place to eat, and they come and they sleep there. They have their meetings. So it's a place that is really, really a light in that part of the country.
Since then, you have written about Maranatha, again, among other things. You write about a wide variety of things. But what is your mindset when you're going? How is your mindset different when you're going to gather a story in the mission field or about some sort of mission work that's happening versus maybe another kind of story or event? Is there a distinction you can think of?
Yes. First of all, I never know beforehand what I'm going to find on the field. Sometimes you think that's a story, and when you get to the place, you discover that it is not, and something you didn't expect suddenly becomes more prominent. So I always pray. I say, well, Lord, somebody is investing, somebody is spending money to send me here. So give me the stories because I'm going to be 3, 4, 5 days. Give me the story. Connect me with the people who can really share something that can be uplifting. So when it's an official church event, it's easier maybe to plan, but it's more predictable. But in these cases, I'm always open to something that I didn't expect it, but suddenly you start talking to someone and something comes up.
You've been doing this for many years, but so you've gotten better and better every year you've done it. It might become almost normal, but do you still get excited when you show up and there's literally no story and you have to create this out of nothing?
Well, yeah, without excitement, I wouldn't go. I would stop going. I don't think if I am better now. I'm faster, maybe.
Yeah.
I have learned to work a little faster, but that sense, the emotion, to feel the power of the story, I think it hasn't changed from the very first one, that one in Cuba, all the other stories.
Yeah. Better is probably not the right word. I guess I meant there's sometimes in these stories there's a formula and you know what you need to get, to be able to tell this story. So it's easier and maybe it gets less exciting because the steps you need to, the process you need to do to cover that particular story. But it sounds like when you show up and you don't know where the story is going to be, that is exciting because you got to find it somehow.
Yeah, but when I look back, I can attest. I think the Lord led me to some people, or they came, or something somehow happened, and that I didn't plan. And I think that's the beauty, the surprise. What is going to happen? I don't know. Let's wait.
What are the best stories that you've written? Like what kind of stories are the best? Is there a certain particular kind of tension that, you know, people have really responded to when they've read your stories?
Well, conversion stories are usually very motivating. When someone shares how God was present in their lives, how God used somebody in some way to bring them to Bible truth, that's very, very powerful. And you think, well, it's always the same, you know. No, because there's so many ways that God is present and active, and there's so many stories, and some of them, because we need to double check and talk to the pastor and fact check to see that it's real, because you say, can it be like this? And you talk to one and to another person, and you say, yes. So you either believe it or not, but you can tell that God is active and calling people who are willing or who are searching, and they don't know. So that's very powerful. And also the impact of the church and the supporting ministries like Maranatha in the life, in like tangible ways, that lives are now best or better than before because of what people committed to the Lord are doing in service for Him. As a journalist, I imagine you're not necessarily getting attached to the work that you're there to really tell the story and be objective, but I imagine working for the church and covering stories, supporting ministries like Maranatha, you can't help but not be impacted by the stories you're writing, right? Yes. I was, in the past, an interpreter too, in a booth, you know, with headphones into Spanish. And you learn not to get involved with what you're hearing. You are a machine, sort of. You know? Interesting, yeah. And but yeah, as a journalist, I crossed that line several times because I just get moved by the stories I hear, and I had an experience this last weekend, a few days ago, when I was in an event in Prague, in Czechia, and I was talking about service. I was talking about Kajiado in Kenya, Maranatha project, and about the girls and the ministry there. And I have prepared myself and say, I don't want to get emotional. I just focus on what I have to say, which I did. But I have an interpreter into Czech, and he was moved. So I held it together, but he was breaking, just translating into Czech what I was telling. It happens, right? I mean, there's, when God touches your heart, and especially with a story like the girls at Kajiado, what they've overcome. What have you, you spent some time there on a Maranatha project. What did you learn from those girls? Yeah, well, that was a very meaningful project because it was the first that the whole family went with my wife and kids. And my wife grew up, she's from Argentina, but she grew up in Africa in a missionary home. So that trip to Kajiado in 2022 was the first time he was in Africa in 25 years. Wow. So it was very meaningful for her to go back and also to learn about the story of the girls. For my kids who grew up in Canada, very pampered, it was an eye-opening to be able to see another reality. And also every one of us were changed and transformed by the power of not only of what Maranatha can give, but the power, the effect on those young girls when they see something better, and they begin trusting God, and God rewards them.
Yeah.
Their efforts.
We should say, for people that maybe are just listening to this episode, haven't listened to any of the past ones, that the Kajiado Adventist School and Rescue Center in Kenya is a haven for Maasai girls who are escaping child marriage and female genital mutilation, and it's been around for a couple of decades, just being able to provide education, but more than that, a new home for these girls. There's also some boys that live there and go to school there as well, but for many of these girls, they've escaped and have sort of been banished by their families. They can't necessarily go back once they've left, and so the teachers become aunts and uncles and new role models for them, and their fellow students are their new brothers and sisters, and it is providing hope and a new future to these girls. And you got to experience that firsthand. What was it like? What did your kids think?
Well, they couldn't believe their eyes. That's the first thing. But also, and I think that's common for many of the families that go to a Maranatha project, it triggered a lot of discussion on contentment, restraint, making an effort. And because beside the spiritual part that is very powerful, from a human standpoint, we were created to do something meaningful. And when Maranatha provides that for the people who benefit, but also for the volunteers, you feel you're part of something that is making a difference and improving and making lives better. And that is very rewarding and very powerful. We were not created just to look at ourselves in the mirror and navel gazing, as you say. We were created to share, because God is a God who is generous, sure, and that is very, very powerful.
And particularly at that campus where Maranatha worked for 5 years, and that campus is going to live on for generations to come. It's just a good feeling to know that even though you might have only been there for a week or 2 weeks, that work that you did is going to live on, and who knows who's going to come out of that school and what they're going to accomplish,
That is something that I think all the time when I meet especially young people all around the world. Say, who knows? Who am I talking to? Who knows what plans God has for this young person? Here, maybe there's a leader. There's a person who's going to be used by God because he got an opportunity. He got the chance to improve and to get an education, and then to use those talents for God.
Yes. The more you learned about Maranatha, the more you wrote about Maranatha, how did it expand your view of missions in any way?
Oh yes. I think I'm not that old, but I grew up in a church community, and they would say, well, you have to be, a pastor, a teacher, a nurse. That's basically it. If you would, I remember someone telling me, I was a child, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Somebody telling, journalists, they cannot work. You cannot work as a journalist because you have to work on the Sabbath, things like that. Mm-hmm. And those are ideas that are just sometimes we limit God. Say, no, you cannot do. And Maranatha has people who knows a lot about logistics, finances, but also has bricklayers and engineers and architects and people who know all the practical stuff and knows how to deal with all the. And God is using everyone. So if you are more like a nerd like me, so you have a place.
Did you hear that? All the nerds, there's a place for you at Maranatha.
Yes. And then if you don't care, you don't want books, you just a practical person, do it yourself kind of guy, there's a place for you. You can be useful. And if you love cooking, well, you can go and help with that part during the project. And if you love kids, you can go and do VVS, some program for the kids, and so forth and so on. There's a place for everyone who can, God can use anyone who is committed, and whatever talents and affinities you have, he will use it.
The barriers to serving on a Maranatha project are very low. We don't have any, age requirements. You have little kids out on the construction site that are sifting sand or, breaking apart cinder blocks at the right spot where we need an opening. We've had, volunteers in their 90s that are out there also doing work. There's plenty of opportunities even outside the construction site, as you mentioned. You don't even have to be a Seventh-day Adventist to come on a Maranatha trip. So you're absolutely right. Everyone can serve.
And even on the financial part, there's some money involved because you have to pay your ticket and you have to, there's some expenses. But I have found, and many Maranatha volunteers, they tell me the same story. When you decide and when you commit, somehow doors open and windows, and you get some money, or you get ways of funding yourself or getting some money from someone. Or when you are committed, and if it's God's will, he will open a way. You will finally end up and say, well, I am here. I never thought I would do it. So, but it's a matter of trust and commitment, and I think God can do the rest.
In what you've observed, how does that investment in getting on a mission trip benefit the individual after they've left the mission trip? Because it's a short amount of time. You're there, you do some work. It's maybe a small part of the larger project. So how is it benefiting you and maybe humanity after you left the trip?
Well, I have to give away a secret here. Many people have told me, and I agree, it's addictive. Once you try it and you get the feeling, the satisfaction of a project, you want to keep doing it. But also, even if you don't go to another project, it changes your outlook in life. Like, you see things differently. You start maybe being a better manager of whatever funds and resources you have at home. Saying, well, maybe I don't need this. Mm-hmm. I need some restraint here. I need to be more conscious of other people who are not, like most of the world has not the privileges I have. So you become more aware of other people, and I think that's life-changing.
So I was curious, back to Kajiado, you worked in education for a number of years in Argentina. How did that perspective inform what you were seeing at Kajiado as an educational institution, and of course much more than that, but you had a lot of experience coming to that project in education?
Well,
and we should just say you were
I worked, yes.
Yeah.
I taught Spanish language, Spanish writing and translation, financial translation, and I worked a little bit in educational administration, which I didn't like, by the way. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm more a front line.
Yeah.
But education is changing things. Like, I'll tell you about Argentina. In Argentina, you have in every province, there are like 23 provinces. So you have in every province, maybe you have one school, Adventist school, two schools, maybe three at the most. I grew up in a province that is very small, 1 million, now 1 million population. Before it was not even that. But that province has, I think, 17 Adventist schools. So by far is the province where the church is doing better than ever, because when you have a school by the church and you have teachers, you have families, you have parents, and the church follows. So the church grows and thrives. So I think that education, you change the life not only of the students, you change the life of a community. And one of the things that the church could do, I think, is to support more and more the educational part, because it changes life and communities and families for the better, for good.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the strong selling points of the Adventist Church around the world, the quality Christian education, and people are attracted to that, and people who want to send their kids to a good school, and pretty soon they are becoming familiar with the Adventist Church because of proximity, and being a part of that school community, and church grows. Yeah,
and it's a catalyst for mission, for sure.
Yeah.
I have former students all around the world. They are everywhere serving, volunteers or like full-time church workers, leaders. They are everywhere, because once you try it, you want to do the same for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this, could we say, transformational experience at Kajiado? Would that be accurate?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
I should ask. I mean, in what way do you say it's transformational for you?
Well, it was a confirmation that this is what I want to do. And not only what I want to do, it's what I think the Lord is pushing me or taking me to do. And I say to I'm 50 now. I turned 50. So I said, well, how many more years I can do this? Maybe a couple of decades if I'm healthy enough. But, in that time I have left to be youthful, actively youthful, well, this is what I want to do.
Going on Maranatha projects.
That's a big part of it. Telling stories.
Telling the stories.
And Maranatha, of course, is a great place to find stories.
So you have this transformational experience at Kajiado in 2022.
Yes.
And then you get to return back in 2024 for the dedication. You see the finished campus. What was it like seeing that?
Well, the change was, when I went in 2022, Maranatha had been like 4 years already. But the change in the last 2 years was really impressive. And I did a presentation on that, and I put the photos together, 2022, 2024, side by side. And it was impressive. It's a place you feel, as a student, I imagine, you feel proud. That's cool. It boosts your self-esteem. And it's really, really changed. Of course, that behind that, there's a lot of work, a lot of prayer, and a lot of generosity, because there's a lot of money behind it.
Yeah.
But the results are impressive.
There is a subconscious sort of elevation of like what you think you can accomplish when you're in a nice setting, if that makes sense. And when you're in a campus like that, where the buildings are new, everything looks nice and is tidy, it has an effect, whether it's subconscious or not, on the students and the standard they hold themselves to. So you're right. It's definitely a transformation unlike anything that we've seen. So you went from not knowing that much about Maranatha in 2017 to experiencing a wide variety of the work that Maranatha does. What should the Adventist world know about Maranatha that maybe isn't well known? Well,
I always think about potential. And I think more people need to try it. You cannot, you read the stories, but you need to experience it. And I'm convinced there are thousands of potential volunteers and donors who are there. Mm-hmm. And we don't know them yet. But I think we need to push and keep sharing in a way that more people can get a taste.
Yeah.
If we would spend less time sometimes arguing about, social issues and politics, and we focus on mission, on changing lives like Jesus did, I think that is so powerful. It's so powerful. So I think there's a lot of potential for growth.
You get all sorts of people on a Maranatha project, and they all work together in unison because of their focal point. It's on the mission, on the work.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Marcos, you've written a number of stories about Maranatha and experienced things and sharing about the church. How have you seen God at work in your life through Maranatha?
Well, I have a confession to make. I often, like in my local church, I get bored when I'm just sitting there on the Sabbath, and we have a wonderful pastor. He's great. He's a good preacher, a good person, very balanced, very committed. But if I'm just, a
consumer.
Yes. Yeah. It's not enough. It's not enough. So I love being home. I don't like being away from home. I love my family. But when I, take the Uber to the airport, whatever, I start getting, something here, jittery, because that is really meaningful. It's really powerful. And I feel my life improves spiritually too by doing that, by getting out sometimes from my comfort zone and going to different places, trying different things, just to connect and to share with others what God is doing. That is very, very powerful for me to keep connected to God.
What advice do you have for volunteers who may be a little apprehensive about doing what you're talking about, taking that first step and going out on a mission trip? What advice do you have for them?
Well, you pray and you move forward. There's no other way. If you don't do it, you might regret it. Say, I should have when I was younger, or when I was. Start praying, saving if you have to, and God will open a way. If there's a mission for you, He will open a way for you to be part of it, and I can assure you, you will not regret it.
I think that's a great place to end. Marcos, thank you so much for coming and sharing a little bit of your experience with Maranatha and your work with the Worldwide Church. And we really appreciate you being on Inside Missions.
Thank you.
If you've loved this episode with Marcos and appreciated his perspective, check out some of our other episodes, especially the one about Kajiado, and make sure to share and rate our show and subscribe on YouTube. It really helps us a lot. Thanks.